Οπλήν γενέσθω το παν, και πρωτοστήνε την γην και των ουρανών, γινώσκον τα πάντα, ως όρος Πατρί και όρθερον εν ύμνη.
Δόξα Συ ο Θεός ημών, δόξα Συ. Λόγος συνέστησαν των ουρανών αματική, συνείδημα το Πατρί, και διαλόγου φέρω το δε παν, ο λόγος σοφία και δύναμις και οίκων και συνεργός και ισουργός.
Δόξα Συ ο Θεός ημών, δόξα Συ. Εις όρους έπετων, εις ο αιώνας.
Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and this is my blog at the end of what is my last full day in Cyprus. It's obviously not my last day because I'm around tomorrow, but I'm flying out at 2, so realistically this is the final day where anything's going to happen. I will probably make a video about tomorrow, but it will just be a kind of summing up of the whole trip. Today I've been in Paphos. I haven't gone anywhere else, but I'm absolutely knackered. I've walked 30,000 steps because Paphos has a lot to see, and it's all pretty damn spread out. So where I'm staying is Ktimi Paphos, which is the old town. It's actually used to be the Turkish part of town, but they kicked them all out. And the kind of tourism action is in Kato Paphos, the lower town. So I walked down there this morning. It was a walk about 3 kilometers. Grabbed a coffee and a kind of pastry for breakfast. It's a Sunday today, so most shops were closed. And I walked down there, and then I saw the sites, and quite apt being a Sunday, the first site I went to was a religious site. It was the catacombs of Hagia Solomana, I think, and she was apparently, I'd not heard of her before, she was the mother of 8 Jews who died in the Maccabean revolt. So quite why she's commemorated in a Christian shrine, I don't know, but it was one of the most wonderfully powerful shrines I've been to, and it was really nice to visit on a Sunday. As the name suggests, it was a catacomb. You had to go down some steps into a series of caves, very small caves, and the shrine was in the caves. And it was nice. At the top there was a tree growing, and people had tied little pieces of material to the tree. Now, this is a practice that I've seen done all over the Balkans, and indeed as far away as Georgia. I think it's an ancient pagan practice that is continued by Christians and Muslims alike, and it's always strikes me as a really powerful way of showing devotion. I don't know why, it just does. But it was a beautiful little shrine, and I sat in there for quite some time contemplating. And then I left, and I carried on walking, and very nearby is the church of St. Paul of the Pillar. Now, that is, of course, St. Paul of biblical fame, and apparently he was chained to a pillar and whipped there, something that seemed to happen to him quite regularly. And on the spot where this happened, they built this church. Now, the church they built was absolutely enormous. I think it had like 6 naves or something. It was huge, but it fell into ruin. And then in the 16th century, a smaller church was built within the ruins, and that church, the Church of St. Paul of the Pillar, there was a service going on. Now, Alex had told me about this church because it is an Orthodox church, but they let the Catholics and the Anglicans use it for service. And I'd actually looked up the night before to see when the service was, but it was like 8 in the morning. I'm like, that is not happening. But there was a service going on then, and that's because it was the Catholic service. So I went in and I caught the end of the Catholic service, and it was really beautiful. I didn't take communion, not because I'm not Catholic. I don't really have many scruples there, but because I'd actually not sat through the Mass, so I didn't think it was right to do that. But it was nice to see the service, and what a beautiful, simple church. It was absolutely glorious. And although it was a Catholic church, there were no statues there, one presumes, not to offend the Orthodox, and so it had this beautiful feel of this kind of Catholic come Orthodox church. It was absolutely perfect, it really was. And what was interesting, when the Mass finished, people were filing out, the next lot were filing in, and that service was the one in Polish, and that was just as well attended as the English service. And there are a lot of Poles here. I don't know why, but there are. Seems to be a very popular place for them. So then I continued down to the harbour, which was quite pretty in a mass tourism kind of way. And then I went to one of the two main reasons to visit Paphos, which is the archaeological site of near Paphos, New Paphos. And this is basically, actually the church and the catacombs were part of this old city. They were on the edge of it, and most of the city is now an archaeological site. And the main reason to go are the mosaics. And there are, I think, 4 main houses. The first one was Ion's house, I think, Anion's or something like that. And that had a building built over it to preserve the mosaics, and that was pretty amazing. That blew me away, because I've seen a lot of mosaics, particularly when I was in Jordan, but these were much finer. Like, the stones were much smaller than the ones I saw in Jordan, and they were earlier. These are pagan ones, so there's a lot about Dionysus and Aphrodite and all those kind of gods. There's nothing Christian there. It's all pre-Christian. And the next villa, I forget the name. I'll put it down there. But that one was exposed to the air, but there was still some good mosaics, and there was also a small one at the back, but all those mosaics were covered to protect them, so I didn't really see much of that. But the pride of it is the Villa of Dionysus. It's called so because there are mosaics of Dionysus, and that was also covered over to preserve them. So it really was. I'm not a huge fan of mosaics, but it was pretty spectacular. It was worth the effort. The rest of the city, less so. There was a lighthouse in the middle of it, because of course it's built on a promontory, but that was quite modern. But there was like the agora with the theatre, as like I've seen better theatres even quite recently, so that didn't interest me so much. And there was also like a kind of extension of the catacombs area, although non-shrine, so it wasn't as atmospheric as the Hagia Soleimani one. But there was a Byzantine castle called the 40 Pillars, and that was quite something. And there was always huge grey pillars, different rock. I think it was granite. Not sure. Not very good on my rocks, but because all the rest is limestone, and it's very porous. But lying around, and I assume they were the pillars, and this was a Byzantine castle. So I went there, and then I came out and had a drink. And to kind of rest my weary feet, because I'd already done almost 20,000 steps, that far. And then got chatting to a chap on the next table, and he was an American. There was loads of Americans in a group. They were on a cruise, and he was there with his Asian wife. They'd been married 50 years, and he was telling me about his time in Vietnam. He was a vet there, and he'd lived in England, obviously ex-military, and been in Korea and stuff. So I talked about when I was living in Vietnam and when I'd lived in Japan and stuff, and it was really, really nice. Never caught his name though, unfortunately. Then I went on, and I wanted to go and see Paphos Castle, but it was shut. It didn't look that spectacular. It was just kind of a bit of a square on the end of the harbour. And so then I walked. There's a walk around the promontory, so it goes around the edge of the archaeological site, right along the coast. Quite a long walk. I'd say probably about 3-kilometre walk. But that was nice. It was quite relaxing. There's a good path. And I also, what was really amazing is there was a bird of prey that was hovering, waiting to catch fish, and I could get really close to it and see it hovering before it dived down to catch the fish. That was something special. And of course, that promontory was the one that the bird watching chap that I chatted to on the plane going over, he was going to that promontory a lot, so it's apparently renowned for birds. Then after that, I carried on, and went to the Tomb of the Kings. Now, I couldn't quite walk along the beach to it. I had to go inland a bit, and I stopped for lunch. I have to confess, at Kentucky Fried Chicken, just because everywhere else was only doing mains for like 20 euros each, and I didn't want a main. I wanted something small, so I had to like just a quick bite of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then went in. And that was my first use of a Western chain now on the whole trip, so it's not too bad. And then went into the next major attraction, which Alex had said was one of his favourite in the whole of Cyprus, and that was the Tombs of the Kings. Now, the Tombs of the Kings are not Tombs of Kings; they're tombs of important people, but they're not kings. But it is quite a weird and exciting site. So it's another vast archaeological site, and there's loads of tombs dug into the rock, basically, and some are just holes in the rock, some are a little bit more, you go down some steps and there's a couple of chambers and that, but there's several where you go down these steps and you get to a courtyard with pillars all made out of solid rock, and then the tombs are branching off from these. It was pretty special, that was. So yeah, spent a good time looking around there, and then walked back, and that's why I'm absolutely shattered, because it was a walk uphill all the way back to the old Turkish quarter where I am now, where I'm relaxing and reflecting on my day, chilling out, and then I'm going to go out for a souvlaki tonight, and that is it. So thanks for listening. Keep traveling.
Είδετε ότι εγώ είμαι Θεός, ο πριν γενέσω το παν, και πρωτοστήνε την γη και των ουρανών, κοινώς κον τα πάντα, ως όρος Πατρί